Well, CrowdStrike is just out now with its third quarter results. Let's get you those numbers. Q3 EPS, 96 cents versus an estimate of 94 cents. Q3 revenue, 1.23 billion versus an estimate of 1.21 billion. So beats there on the bottom and the top. Let's get to the guidance. Q4 adjusted EPS calling for between 109 to 111. The estimate was 108. And Q4 revenue, they're calling for between 1.29 and 1.3 billion. The estimate was 1.29 billion. And for full year revenue outlook, they're now seeing, it looks like between 4.8 to 4.81 billion. They had seen between 4.75 and to 4.81 billion. Keep in mind, this stock had enjoyed a big run heading into this print. It was already up about 50% this year, and it looks like we're up about 0.6%, at least initially here in the after hours. Matt, you've seen the results. What do you make of the report?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. As you noted, expectations were high coming into the print. The stock had a really strong move. Just looking at the numbers, it looks like a solid print. Net new ARR, which is the number we focused on, grew 23%. That accelerated versus 20% last quarter. ARR beat expectations, revenue beat expectations. And so, it was a really solid print across the board. And we look at Q4 guidance. It's effectively in line with consensus. So at first blush, it looks like a solid overall print.
I know you have a buy on the name, Matt. The stock, though, as we were talking about there, what a run year to date heading into this report, up around 50%. How would you think about and just kind of characterize valuation here, Matt?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Yeah, we look at cybersecurity as a good place to be in the market right now, right? I mean, there's a lot of concern about, what AI's impact is on software overall. We see cybersecurity as more of a defensive space, and obviously with the potential threats increasing based on AI, we do see CrowdStrike as uniquely positioned there. And when we think about AI winners, these stocks often carry hefty traditional valuation metrics. But we've liked this name for the long term in terms of the growth and expansion opportunities. And so, we do think it's a uniquely placed asset.
Let me ask you about, just remind me, when we talk about that kind of broader cybersecurity market, who would you say are CrowdStrike's primary rivals, and what does CrowdStrike bring to the table that's different, Matt? What's the competitive advantage?
Yeah, I mean, when we think about traditional competitors, there's some legacy antivirus competitors that we don't see that much often. But in terms of broader, cyber consolidators, it's Palo Alto, it's Microsoft. And increasingly, those are two of their bigger rivals. But, as the lines begin to blur between security and observability, we think the competitive landscape could increase in the future. And we think about what differentiates CrowdStrike, it really comes down to the architecture. We think it's a unique single code base that's cloud native, high retention, low churn. The ability to upsell modules is very high. And so we think in an area where cyber consolidation increases in the future, not decreases, we do think CrowdStrike is uniquely positioned to help customers consolidate spend.
How, Matt, is CrowdStrike leveraging AI? I ask as my buddy Dan Ives over at Wedbush. Here's how he put it, Matt. He says, the street is underestimating the growth potential for CrowdStrike as a derivative beneficiary of the AI revolution. What do you think?
Yeah, listen, I tend to agree. I do think based on, it all gets back to the architecture. And we think CrowdStrike is leveraging AI internally, because the challenge, as you're well aware, is that, adversaries are themselves using AI. And so to stop these zero-day threats, these unknown unknowns, as we sometimes call them, requires quite a bit of data, quite a bit of analytics. We think CrowdStrike is rather uniquely positioned to do that. And so, in the future, as AI threats increase, as CrowdStrike's able to increase their own AI efficacy, we do think they're in, again, a rather unique position to take mounds of data and ultimately help customers stay ahead of these adversaries.
Last one, Matt. I know you have a buy on this name. I'm just curious, though, when clients, Matt, those RBC clients, they ask you, okay, you're a believer, Matt, but what are the risks I got to think about? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, all these stocks have risks. I mean, I think, competition is certainly, generally something that we talk about. There's an increased focus on consolidation, and some of the vendors that we noted before are competitors. I think, there's always the risk we saw with CrowdStrike with their outage a couple of years ago. These systems are important, they're interconnected. And so, there could be some unforeseen situation like that. But we generally think CrowdStrike has learned from a lot of what they've seen in the past. And we do think, as this platform continues to scale out, they're giving their customers a unique advantage here. So yeah, it certainly is not without risk, but we do think CrowdStrike is, again, rather uniquely positioned based on their platform and architecture.
Matt, always great to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.